Urgent, Russia has finally gotten what it deserves. The strikes that have ultimately shattered Putin's power, unbelievably, our forces pulled it off. Disaster crept up from behind because the events in Kherson region turned out to be an unexpected blow for Putin. He lost his own army. In the chaos at the front, Kremlin soldiers did something. Putin is foaming at the mouth over this. The Far East is being cut off from Russia, and the Allies have truly outdone themselves. The tank crisis is a fiasco. A top submarine has sunk. NATO made it happen. All of this is in our episode of Hell Point. A shocking rout of Russia. Epic footage has flooded the internet. Russians are crying out against the so-called special military operation. At last, the system has cracked. Russia is breaking from within. This is a rout, a catastrophe of unprecedented scale. Apparently the enemy doesn't have enough drones. They're asking for even more firepower. Our weapons have broken through, cutting off even the most remote regions of Russia and even Crimea. Has it really begun? We'll talk about this in just a moment.
Once again, flames are raging in the Samara region. Explosions rang out at the Novokibishevsk oil refinery. Local residents filmed the air defense in action, but the drones still hit their target. Columns of smoke and fire rose above the facility.
At night, drones attempted to attack an industrial facility in the region. The infrastructure was partially damaged. A fire broke out in one of the workshops at the gas plant facility.
The plant is part of the NK Rosneft group. It produces jet fuel, lubricants for rocket systems and automobiles. Its capacity exceeds 8,800,000 tons per year. This is already the fourth attack on this facility since the beginning of the year. Previous strikes were recorded in March, August and September. Due to the threat of new attacks, the Russian authorities announced the carpet plan in 3 cities at once: Orenburg, Samara and Ufa.
Well, that's it, obviously. The plant is screwed.
Also, during the night of October 19th, drones attacked a gas plant in the Orenburg region. The governor confirmed that after the strike, one of the plant's workshops caught fire. Boom! In the Ulyanovsk region, the Veshkaima electrical substation with a capacity of 500 kilowatts was hit. According to local authorities, 4 strike drones hit the site. There were 2 explosions and a fire broke out. Some settlements were left without electricity.
This facility connected the Ulyanovsk, Mordovia, Chuvash and Samara regions and served as a transit hub for supplying electricity from the Syzran and Zhiguli hydroelectric power plants to the central regions of Russia.
Local media report that despite official statements about restoration, it is too early to claim the facility is operating normally. Replacing the equipment could take several months. In Bashkortostan, there was an explosion at the avant-garde military plant in the city of Sterlitamak. 3 people were killed. Thick smoke billowed over the industrial zone and the city began to smell of gunpowder. The avant-garde plant manufactures ammunition, disposes of explosives and produces chemical products. The cause of the detonation has not been disclosed at this time. Meanwhile, in temporarily occupied Crimea, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces struck 2 enemy targets at once, an oil depot in Vradivsky and the Hvardievsky complex in the Saki district.
As a result of the successful actions of the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, the oil depot in Vardiivske and the FDKU Hvardiivsky complex, located in the village of Karyerne in the Saki district, were hit.
At the same time, in the Khanty-Mansisk district, new symptoms of a fuel crisis are emerging. In Surgut, there are lines at gas stations, and in Nayagan, gasoline is sold only with special cards. A shortage is also being observed in occupied Crimea. Cheaper fuel is disappearing and wholesale prices are rising almost daily. A series of attacks on energy and industrial infrastructure is exposing the vulnerability of the Russian economy. Losses in the energy sector, fuel problems, and disruptions in logistics are the new reality for regions far from the front line.
Right at this moment, it has begun near Kherson. Russian soldiers have started fleeing from the army like rats. Russian generals are in shock. They pray that this commotion doesn't reach the Kremlin, but it's in vain. The machine has been set in motion. There is no desire to fight. Putin's mercenaries are laying down their arms and shocking details are emerging. The Kremlin doesn't care about its own people, the treasury is empty, and the number of so-called black bags grows every day. Is this the beginning of the collapse of the Russian army? The answer to this question is in the following report.
A wave of desertion has swept over the Russian army. In the 4th year of the war, no one except the bunker dweller is looking for or believes in any victories anymore. No one believes Putin or Kremlin propaganda, which romanticizes the front line anymore. Stagnation. People just want some excitement. Instead, Russian soldiers are looking for any opportunity to escape as far away as possible from the Kremlin's excitement in Ukraine. For example, partisans from the movement are now reporting a mass escape of servicemen in the Kherson direction.
Brutal treatment by commanders, senseless assaults, and the lack of rotation are forcing soldiers to abandon their positions.
They decided to fix the situation in Putin's army in the typical Russian way. Instead of improving service conditions, they tighten control over the exhausted and half-starved contract soldiers. They have deployed reinforced checkpoints and patrols in the frontline areas. The military police are conducting thorough document checks and searches for deserters.
Agents among the local residents report that deserters very often seize residential houses, and if discovered, they use weapons.
Moreover, lately, Russian deserters have increasingly started taking hostages with them as well.
Right now I am in a store with hostages. I am holding a live F1 grenade without the safety pin. I just want to be taken to the prosecutor's office. I will surrender to the prosecutor's office.
The Russian soldier was driven to such a radical step by the conditions of service, the blatantly indifferent attitude of the command toward the lives of the personnel, and the constant abuse within the unit.
I am Konstantinov Sehi Seri, Private 60th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, 9th Company, 3rd Battalion. They forced me to leave the front line while wounded. I had to withdraw on foot by myself because my commander threatened to tie me to a tree overnight so that I would be killed by drones or to shoot me since I refused to carry out a combat mission while wounded.
Punishment in the form of chaining soldiers to trees in open areas is generally a favorite disciplinary tactic among Russians on the front line. Instead of executing their own contract soldiers themselves, the command simply exposes the penal troops in open areas, where they have only a few hours left before being hit by Ukrainian FPV drones.
These are Ukrainian FPV drones, which stands for first-person view. These unmanned aerial vehicles are crucial for reconnaissance, targeting and delivering precision strikes on enemy positions, playing a vital role in the ongoing conflict. That's how things are.
Surviving even a single day under such conditions is far from possible for everyone. Surviving after more sophisticated punishments in the Russian army is much harder, says another deserter named Sergei. The 34-year-old Russian still can't believe that he eventually managed to escape from the front.
And all of that and everything else that goes along with it. Oh.
Because the mobilized Russian electrician, a civilian, steadfastly refused to take up arms and go to kill innocent Ukrainians.
The military police arrived. I told them, just fuck off, just go away. That's it. And they took him to Zaitsevo. They tortured him with electricity. And the device for charging batteries, where you can adjust the voltage and amperage, basically one clamp right from the crocodile clip to his earlobe, the other to his finger. And then they started, basically, what? Why? Where to? They didn't want anything. They just tortured with electricity, poured cold water on us. Sometimes for an hour and a half, 2 hours under the hose. For no reason. Special effects procedures.
But no matter how much Russian army soldiers are intimidated in basements, their general's desire to live prevails. Especially since, in the case of desertion, the chances of survival are much higher than in yet another meat grinder assault. Catastrophic losses at the front are another reason for the mass escape from the front lines.
Why? Because it's one failure after another there. Every third wounded doesn't make it to evacuation. There are major problems there. There, the so-called subsequent actions were delayed by exactly 2 to 3 times as reported by American analytical centers. Is a failure there.
Military analysts say that recently being wounded at the front for Russian soldiers is practically equivalent to being killed. The medics of the Russian armed forces simply leave their own wounded to die, right at their positions. Partisans in the Russian rear also report that the situation with evacuating the wounded is simply catastrophic. The command of some units deliberately does not send transport or evacuation teams for wounded soldiers, condemning them to a long and painful death.
Due to the lack of vehicles and evacuation orders, the occupiers die within the first day after being wounded. Many of them could have survived if they had received timely medical assistance. The officers of these units openly state that it is easier to find new people than to risk the equipment. This is direct evidence that the command of the Russian army considers its soldiers expendable.
But this expendable material also has a tendency to run out, just like the money to maintain it. The Kremlin's treasury is empty. There is no money left to pay endless death benefits and, more importantly, signing bonuses for contracts with the Ministry of Defense of the aggressor country. As a result, the authorities in at least 8 regions of the Russian Federation have reduced one-time payments several times over. In Tatarstan, Chuvashia, and Samara Oblast, the payments have been cut from 3.2 million to just 800,000 rubles.
This is an avalanche that has started. Putin has no money. Putin no longer has the ability to directly hand out money and maintain what is now essentially a mercenary army.
No money means no fools willing to die at the front, analysts explain. The draft offices across the border have long been unable to fulfill the tasks set by the Kremlin. No tricks work anymore.
That's crony capitalism for you, just slicing up the cash. Here's the formula now. People are profiting from the war. And in the end, the population loses its initiative.
And along with it, the desire to go to the front. But the desire to get out of that very front as quickly as possible. And the willingness to pay any amount of money for it just keeps growing. So in the near future, the Russian army is facing a much larger wave of desertion.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Shock. The Far East is slipping out of the Kremlin's hands. Quietly but inevitably. While Moscow is bogged down in war, China and North Korea are step by step taking over this region. Beijing is pouring in money and Pyongyang is massively settling the territory. Something historic is happening right under Putin's nose. What is really going on? Is this a silent surrender of territory or the cold calculation of a dictator? All the details about this are in the following report.
Russia is losing the Far East. Not officially, but in reality.
The Far East, without any exaggeration, has become the most important factor in strengthening Russia's position in the world. Our flagship into the new global economic reality.
While the Kremlin is preoccupied with war, the region is quietly being divided by its neighbors, China and North Korea.
I would definitely call it a creeping takeover, a gradual creeping migration. For now, of course, complete control over the vast Far East region still remains firmly in Moscow's hands, but there are increasingly more and more Chinese people residing there, and they are progressively playing an ever more significant and substantial role in the local economy and its development. Well, as they say, today they play a big role in the economy, and tomorrow they'll play a big role in politics.
Over 1 trillion rubles in investments from China sounds like aid. But all of this revolves around trade, not the development of the region.
China needs to make use of Russian resources at a lower cost, and accordingly they will have that opportunity. And that's why I think that the economic dependence of these regions on China will only continue to grow.
Also, the Chinese have long ceased to be guests in Russia.
Vladivostok is simply unnecessary. It should be given to the Chinese. That's what they want. So what can you do? The Chinese can simply come in and no one here will resist anymore. There will be no one left to resist and nothing to resist with.
According to various estimates, up to 2 million Chinese live from Vladivostok to the Urals.
This is called, they're settling these territories with Chinese people and in various forms. These include both migrants themselves as well as mixed marriages from which children are born. And these regions are becoming more and more closely tied to China.
Now about North Korea. In the Far East, just in the past year, more than 15,000 North Koreans have officially arrived and unofficially up to 50,000. And that's not the limit yet. Already there is an order for
all the most important contracts.
So it turns out that Moscow has handed over the region for temporary use. But why?
Putin needs people whom, as he believes, are easy to control. It doesn't matter, even if not directly, but through intermediaries. That's why he's convinced that these people won't start a revolution, won't protest against Moscow's actions. He thinks these are very convenient people, and it would be good if Russia were populated precisely by such convenient people. After all, not much can be achieved with his own people.
But everything comes at a price. And the longer the Kremlin turns a blind eye, the more important the question becomes: who is really in charge of the Far?
Not between Russia and NATO, but rather between China and the USA, and indeed between China and Europe. In this particular case, today's Russia is very much like a loyal guard dog that diligently obeys its master's every single command without question.
So what happens next? Is it possible for the Far East to return to Moscow's real control? Or, on the contrary, will the influence of China and North Korea only continue to grow?
The influence of China and North Korea will only continue to grow. And accordingly, China itself will decide whether it needs to formally annex all of this, or if it's enough to have, well, let's say, complete economic control today, and tomorrow that will become complete political control.
It seems that while Putin is focused on seizing other people's territories, he is gradually losing his own. And ironically, these territories are being taken not even by enemies, but by the Kremlin's allies.
The Russian Federation is on the verge of complete collapse. Putin quietly weeps in the Kremlin. The occupiers are doing everything they can to keep up appearances, but it's all in vain. There are almost no tanks left. A severe shortage of weapons is paralyzing the Russian army and driving it to real madness. Are donkeys really coming into play again? And on top of that, China might shut off the arms supply. Russia is left without supplies. What other shocking failures of the Russian military-industrial complex have come to light? We'll find out in a moment.
Russian tanks are on the verge of extinction. It seems the Russian military-industrial complex can't keep up, and soon there will be nothing left to fight with at all. And it appears the reason is sanctions.
The role of sanctions here is mostly that they restrain this growth and worsen the overall quality of the products that Russia manufactures. And in the long term, they weaken the implementation of technologies like artificial intelligence, which Russia could have adopted.
The strong Russian economy that the Kremlin talks about is starting to show a noticeable crack.
Sooner or later, the overheating of the war economy may not lead to its collapse, but to a sharp downturn. The general economic trends in the Russian Federation will also affect the military sector of the economy.
It would seem that for the first time since 2022, salaries have started to fall at Russia's most important enterprises. And yes, we're talking about companies in the military-industrial complex.
Undoubtedly, lending to enterprises in the military-industrial complex has an impact. And the form and volume of this lending differ from those in the non-military sector. This used to be a plus, but now it's working against them. In fact, it has either reached its peak, a plateau, or even a turning point.
But how do the staffing shortages and economic problems affect the expansion of Russia's military-industrial complex?
The Russian economy's ability to supply the army, to supply the war with equipment and ammunition, these capabilities are not unlimited, especially with such rapid expansion. The modern Russian economy, in its current state, simply cannot reach the impressive Soviet-era levels of production and influence. Of course,
sanctions are not a toy, especially when they worsen the condition and quality of military equipment, or even completely halt its new production. But here, Soviet-era tanks come to the rescue.
The primary focus was squarely placed on restoring Soviet equipment. The old Soviet equipment retrieved from storage bases, the comprehensive restoration of ammunition, their thorough inspection, getting them fully ready for combat operations. However, these resources are not entirely limitless either.
And now the time has come when old equipment doesn't make the job easier, but actually makes it harder.
There are fewer and fewer units left that are suitable for repair. They have to repair things that aren't even fit for repair, sort through them, and assemble working units from several different ones. This requires more effort, more work, and so on.
Thus, instead of producing new and modern equipment, Russia is increasingly resorting to using old and worn-out machinery.
The production of new equipment is hindered both by sanctions and by the unpreparedness of the manufacturing base. That's why the increase in production of modern types of weaponry is happening. But these are nowhere near the rates Russia needs to compensate for its losses on the battlefield. That's why they prefer to fund what will deliver results here and now, not tomorrow or the day after.
One should not forget about Putin's loyal friends, China and Iran. They are actually helping him a great deal.
We have always been together, so we remain together now as well.
But any arms supply is more a way for Beijing to keep Moscow on a short.
A leash is a strap or cord, typically made of leather, nylon or chain, that is used to restrain and guide an animal, most commonly a dog. It is usually attached to a collar or harness worn by the animal, providing the handler with control and ensuring the animal's safety and the safety of others during walks, training, or in public spaces.
But in the end, what do we have today? It is known that in 2024, Russia's military industry has reached the limits of its capabilities. But what are Russia's prospects now?
There may be a so-called payment. That is, when the maximum indicators have been reached, further growth is impossible, but it is possible to prevent a decline through administrative means.
The only question is how long the Kremlin will be able to maintain this level. And what if it turns out that an unexpected blow comes not from the front?
They have less chance of staying on this plateau. For now, they're stealing quite a lot. With each passing year, their appetites grow.
But of course, sanctions are only a small part of what can help Ukraine defend itself against the Russian Federation. At the same time, an important factor is also the increase in Ukrainian production of military weaponry.
You can't believe that sanctions alone will solve everything. We also need to develop our own production, which is what we're doing, and respond to strikes with strikes. This is the only way. Sanctions are only an alternative to weapons, but not a substitute for them. That's why we have to work on both fronts.
The event that the Kremlin presented as a grand occasion turned out to be a real failure. Off the coast of France, there's an incident that Moscow is trying to cover up at any cost. The submarine they were so proud of has become a symbol of Russia's humiliation. There's panic in the Kremlin. Putin doesn't know how to cover up this disaster. He's stalling for time and avoiding answers. You'll find out what really happened underwater next.
The Russian submarine was detected in the Baltic Sea by the Swedish Navy. The military reported this on the social network X. According to the agency, the vessel entered the Baltic Sea through the Great Belt Strait and was later spotted in the Kattegat between Sweden and Denmark. Air Force units and fighter jets escorted the submarine. The Swedes described this incident as nothing more than a routine mission. The name of the submarine has not been disclosed in Sweden. They only mention that it is a multi-purpose diesel-electric submarine of the Kilo class according to NATO classification. The Novorossiysk submarine, with which the Russians recently embarrassed themselves in front of the whole world when it suddenly surfaced off the coast of France, also belongs to this type.
By many characteristics, this is the best submarine not only in the Russian fleet, but also in the entire world. Its engine runs quieter than the sound of the sea outside, which means the vessel can remain undetected on NATO radar screens.
I pressed play on the video. That's why I call it the black hole for a reason. In other words, I think restoring this submarine would be a major problem for a potential adversary.
This is how, 10 years ago, Russian propaganda talked about the flagship of the modernized project, the submarine Novorossiysk. It was built specifically for the Russian Black Sea Fleet. At the time, the media breathlessly assured that this vessel was capable of sinking an entire group of enemy ships. But now, in 2025, it seems the submarine itself is preparing to go under.
According to the VCHK GPU, due to damage in the fuel system of the Novorossiysk, which is on active duty in the Mediterranean Sea, fuel is leaking directly into the bilge. There are no spare parts for repairs or qualified specialists on board the submarine. The crew is unable to fix the malfunction. Other problems have started to occur as a result of the serious accident. The accumulated fuel in the bilge is an explosive hazard. The investigator believes that the crew has no other choice but to start opening the bilge right in the sea.
In order to, as they say, solve the problem, they will have to, since there is no other option, pump this water-fuel mixture overboard. Well, basically, yes, of course, if something like that starts happening from the planes, and undoubtedly the boat is being watched by aircraft by anti-ice aviation, the Mediterranean Sea, after all, it must be said, is quite a densely populated place. With military vessels from different countries, it will be easy to spot by the large rainbow sheen. In fact, that's exactly what everyone is watching for right now. However, it should be carefully noted that a submarine, approximately 70 meters in length, is not such an extraordinarily big deal, nor does it represent such a truly huge volume, although of course any significant pollution of the surrounding environment is certainly and unequivocally not welcome at all.
Now, in order to prevent the Russians from causing an environmental disaster, hundreds of international experts are monitoring the situation. Meanwhile, the Russian Ministry of Defense is boasting, claiming that there were no emergencies and that everything went exactly as planned. At the same time, they forget to clarify exactly what they are doing in the Mediterranean Sea, given that the withdrawal of the last submarine from there was reported back in January. And most importantly, whether there is a Novorossiysk caliber missile on board, which the Russian army usually launches from these vessels. And furthermore, the command doesn't mention at all whether there is any threat to
the well-being and personal experiences of the crew members themselves are of paramount importance, encompassing their daily routines, their emotional states, their physical health, and their overall quality of life during their arduous and often challenging voyages. Ensuring their safety, comfort, and mental fortitude is absolutely crucial for the success of any mission and the harmonious functioning of the entire vessel. What is the Russian Federation planning to save? Are they planning to save the hardware, or are they planning to save the people? From my point of view, in the event of such an accident, most of the crew should have been evacuated from the ship, from the submarine, leaving only those sailors who could fight to keep the vessel afloat. Fighting diligently to keep the entire vessel afloat and fully operational, first and foremost, absolutely requires that all compartments within the submarine be completely sealed and secured so that there is absolutely no fuel leakage whatsoever throughout the submarine's various compartments.
So far, hardware has been the top priority for officials at the Russian Ministry of Defense. And it is obvious that the experience of the nuclear submarine Kursk, on which 118 crew members died, taught them nothing. They learned nothing. Novorossiysk did not request assistance and is now heading to the port of Kronstadt under the watchful eye of NATO anti-submarine aircraft, where it is supposedly expected on October 21st. According to sources close to law enforcement agencies, there have been 10 incidents during the submarine's watch. If Novorossiysk makes it to the base, the crew will be lucky. They will be replaced by another. Whether the Russians will be able to restore the submarine is a big question.
That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more scorching news in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you.